Welcome everyone, I'm Jello. This is part 6, and we're going to be dividing it into two parts because the amazing amount of material that goes into world building. It will also give us greater focus on our topics. Game masters hold a position only shared with authors, artists, and the imagination. You get to create worlds, from scratch if desired. Your options are only limited by your resolve, but remember your players should always be your motivation. If you make it too outlandish, it may take longer for them to make a connection with it. The same with its laws and magic. Your world may not have elves at all, and so affect player options at creation. Let's go over some subjects that will make your world building easy. Using official campaign settings. Obviously the easiest to use, as the world has already been exhaustively built for you. Every facet of history, politics, and geography is in place and ready to go. There are many old favorites and new ones in this department. These campaign settings are great for new game masters or those getting back into the swing of things. Some game masters never build their own, and there's nothing wrong with that, but this video is geared towards those wanting to create their own. Building yours from scratch. From other parts in the series, you should have gotten a much better idea for the settings you would like to use. Now let's ask ourselves 30 questions divided into sections from the Game Mastery Guide to help you build it. For the heroes. First things first, what do the heroes do in this new world of yours? What's my base of operations? Is it a pastoral shepherd village with farms and nearby wilderness? Or are they from a cosmopolitan city? How big of a role does geography play? Do they start a mile high in the mountains or a mile beneath the waves? Pick a likely spot and be ready to give the players a sentence or two describing it. The details can be fleshed out later. Number 2, do I look like everybody else? Though adventurers are often homegrown heroes raised in unremarkable communities with ordinary backgrounds, just as often they're members of strange and mysterious races or outcasts from far-off places. You should consider what races and backgrounds your players might choose when the game begins. Also decide how this will affect their interactions with the NPCs in the starting location. Allowing offbeat or colorful races that aren't standard also means you need to understand those races and how they work in your society. Number 3, how do I make a living? More simply, how do the heroes keep themselves in room and board, or ale and companionship? How do they pay the bills? Are they mercenary dungeon delvers, or do they have a part-time gig as a city guard or scholar? The answer might differ from character to character. Have them decide what actually puts bread on the table when they aren't adventuring. Have them form a clearer picture of the roles of the heroes in your new world. Next, how long have I been doing this? A great many campaigns assume the heroes start off as first-level adventurers, but that's not the only option. Consider whether you're building a world for low-level heroes or high-level veterans, because this choice affects the presence of wise mentors, young sidekicks, wealthy patrons, and ruthless villains. Number 5, are we at war or at peace? This is a basic level of political information the heroes need. Is there an awful nation sitting at the border ready to invade, or does the world enjoy relative peace? Letting them know this lets them make the classic choice of playing dangerous foreigners, or if there's peace at the start of the campaign, they can play up their characters' backgrounds as innocents, heedless of the threats that lurk on the horizon. Number 6 is really difficult. What am I doing with these other guys? Do they all meet in a tavern, the go-to for most game masters? Do they already know each other from their days serving in the army or militia? Did they participate at the same school or college? Are they related or in the same guild? How your party became a party is an important fact that you should let your players have input on. Let them know as they've created characters what the other players have selected so that they can build a plausible reason for why they're together. Number 7, how are lives affected by magic? Is there magic in your game? Are there restrictions? If they don't initially know what the source or origin is of magic itself, it's not a big deal. But they should have a fairly good understanding of what society thinks of people casting fireballs or summoning demons in town. You're also going to have to tell them whether they should expect to have access to healing magic, or if the world is more gritty and dangerous. Number 8, how are lives affected by religion? You don't need to go into much detail about the gods for the benefit of the players, but you should decide the basics, and what that means for clerics, paladins, and other characters bestowed with divine power. Who or what is trying to kill me? It's always good to know what the major threats are, but you don't have to go into much detail for the players on this score. Who the major threats are. In answering this question, you're also making some decisions about mood and theme. If most of the bad guys are human or half human, this suggests a different kind of world than one in which the villains are all Lovecraftian horrors and their unfortunate minions. And lastly, for the heroes, where can I sell this loot? If your world is one in which a pile of gems await the heroes in subterranean mazes, what do the heroes do with them when they get back to town? Is there a crazy magic shop in every city? Or do the heroes have to craft their own magical wands, potions, and gear? Can they invest in stock or property? Or is there some kind of fence or underground black market to move goods? These are the basics for your heroes, and will help them flesh out not only their character ideas, but how you approach them as the game master. Alright, our next 10 questions follow the mundane stuff, mostly about NPCs. First, who's in charge? Who holds the reins of power? Consider what difference it makes to have a single monarch as opposed to a council of mages, or having a government run by the church. What do citizens think about their government? And how do neighboring nations or societies get along with that authority? Has it always been that way, or has there recently been a regime change? Number 2, who has the biggest army? As a follow-up to the last question, who controls the military? Is there a standing army? Does the government send out calls for militias, or just hire bands of brave adventurers? Is there a legendary troop of knights that leads the army into battle, or are they all made up of golems? Deciding what the military looks like and who controls it not only gives your players somebody to fear, hate, or respect, but also seeds your campaign with hooks for higher level play. As the heroes get sufficiently experienced, they might acquire armies of their own. Number 3, who has the most money and power? This is often connected with the first 2 questions, but it doesn't have to be. It often makes things more interesting when nobility and wealth are not synonymous. Does your world have a merchant class? Are high-level adventurers the wealthiest members of society? Or are they paid to do what they do out of deep pockets of the aristocracy? When you think about money, decide whether to go with the gold piece standard or equipment with different economic systems. Number 4, who maintains law and order? What laws and regulations are in place in your world, and who enforces them? Some settings, such as wild and untamed lands of mystery and danger, leave this up to rangers. Others, especially those that feature high magic, should provide some explanation of how laws are applied to wizards and sorcerers. Number 5, how hard do poor people have it? Nothing produces a cunning and ruthless population of scum and villainy like an impoverished background. How do the classes, especially the lower classes, live? Is there an oppressed or subjugated minority or group that the average townsfolk look down on? As in our own world, wealth is the chief producer of societal friction, and the way it moves through your society can inform everything from social norms and values to crime and military engagements, as well as provide unlimited seeds for adventure. Number 6, how do people travel and how easy is it? In some worlds, the open space between civilized areas is wild and untamed, making travel highly dangerous. Others feature enormous urban sprawls or patchwork villages and farms. Magic changes the game here. Think about how travel works in your world as a result of those choices. Are horses and wagons common? Do people walk to their destinations, fly on horses, take ships? This is a good thing to know. Number 7, what are the best known landmarks? You can bring your world alive through the use of extraordinary and fantastic locations, but they don't have to be limited to the places the heroes explore. What's noteworthy back in town? What can the average citizens of the world see out of his or her back window? Could your starting location be named after such a landmark? Consider what major institutions, legends, or heroes may have some connection to a geographical feature or a nearby ruin. Number 8, why is everybody celebrating? Holy days, feast days, anniversaries are all essential world-building elements, and you should consider sketching out when you're working on your new setting. Number 9, what do people do for a good time? Give some thought about how the average person cools her heels at night when the day's work is done. What form does entertainment take? Are there traveling minstrels or bards? Do taverns and bars stay open all night, or do people spend their time reading books? And number 10, how weird does it get around here? Memorable worlds aren't made up solely of ordinary people living ordinary lives in ordinary towns. Does another plane intersect with an area somewhere close by? Do ghosts walk around carrying their daily business? At times, your players should be equally surprised by the strange things locals have grown used to and no longer think about, or by the apparent lack of weirdness. the scholarly details, or things about the world itself. Number 1, how did the world come to be? This question leads in turn to questions such as how old the world is, what role the gods played in creation, and possibly when the world is going to end. There's a lot of room to add mythology. Number 2, what's the nature of the gods? Are the gods omnipotent and omniscient beings far above the world? Are they capricious? Are they like the gods of Greek myth? Do they interact with the world? There's a lot of options here, but you should at the very least know for yourself what level of detail you want to maintain for your campaign. Number 3, what's the source of magic? The easiest answer to this question is to simply have magic be a part of your world's physics, a natural force that wizards and sorcerers somehow draw upon to work their spells. But you might also consider having arcane magic stem from the gods, or to be left over from some deific war. Are there multiple sources of magic? How does this affect magic of creatures like dragons, fae, or outsiders? Number 4, and one of the most important questions on all of these lists, is what happens when you die. Does your world have an afterlife, a place of eternal reward or suffering? Do souls travel the planes, become servants to the gods, or do they reincarnate? Do people have souls at all? Among the reasons to consider this question is the existence of spells like resurrection and speak with dead, as well as the nature of undeath. What cycles or events define the calendar? One characteristic of a world is the cycle of seasons, the weather, and the passage of time. Does your world have normal seasons? Are some missing entirely? Next, what do you see when you look at the sky? What are the stars? What about the moon or moons and planets? Next, and possibly most important, what constitutes cutting-edge technology? We'll talk about this more in 6.5, but setting the world's tech level can be an excellent defining characteristic. Where does alchemy fit in? Does the printing press exist? What about rudimentary steam power? Number 8, where do monsters come from? While it's easy to assume the presence of monsters, questions like this one open doors to adventure hooks and new monsters. Was there some event in the history of the world that spawned monsters like chimeras, hydras, and dragons? Are monsters an accident of nature or an integral part of the ecosystem? Thinking about these things can also suggest the origin of PC races like elves, dwarves, and gnomes. Number 9. Fantasy worlds often hang in the balance between opposing forces. Is your world all a grand design woven by cosmic beings? Is arcane magic in opposition to the power of the gods and their clerics? Does nature battle magics transforming nature? Or do the forces of order and chaos battle for domination? It's possible that a non-standard answer to these questions can form the heart of a world or a campaign. Number 10. Is there anything you want to change or alter about the physical world? Other than accepted weirdness like magic and demons, what would you change? If so, how can you do it without losing the player's suspension of disbelief? Your world needs to make its own kind of sense to bind the strange and fantastic in a way that feels natural, at least to the world's residents, thus creating a stage for the player's wondrous adventures. Keep an eye out for part 6.5, where we go into further depth about world building.